A visual feast now for Sunday breakfast. Megan Lewis is an award-winning photographer based in Western Australia, and her fascination with one of our most remote Aboriginal communities set her on a journey she thought would last just a few months. Instead, it's consumed her life now for 8 years, and it's culminated in a book.
Do a nice portrait picture.
Megan Lewis has spent her professional life looking through a lens, her work appearing in publications ranging from the Washington Post to Time magazine. But it was an encounter with these people, members of Western Australia's Mardoo community, which would lead her to quit her job, give up everything she'd known, and go on a journey that lasted 8 years.
I thought I was going for 6 months. I had an idea of the roughness, but probably not how rough it was going to be on me. Had I known that, I might have hesitated a bit more, but I think the gut feeling was too strong.
In 2000, Megan was a photographer for the Australian newspaper, sent to cover football training in the Western Desert.
We were sent up to a mine site who were sponsoring some of the young men from the desert to come to play football in Perth for the first time. And I was on the ground with them for about 2 hours, and in that almost immediately I just felt a wave come over me, an instant rapport with them, and thought there's something really special here, something I know I have to do more with.
1,600 kilometres north of Perth, in an area roughly the size of Tasmania, the Mardoo number around 800 people. It was members of the mob whose story was depicted in the film Rabbit Proof Fence. Megan wanted to show the life in an Aboriginal community that doesn't often make the headlines, the laughter, the kinship, the everyday. She knew she couldn't tell their story by just being a visitor.
I thought, I've got to leave the job, and that was a scary thing. Financial security, the whole works, and I did that, packed my bags and took a chance and drove out to the desert.
The elders gave her permission to live among them, but there would be no special treatment.
But people who didn't know me were sort of thinking, well, who's this white fella walking around with his cameras? Because he becomes a she. And for me, I could feel what they were feeling, and it was difficult. So I'd make a point of very quietly going to those people, explaining everything about what I was doing, and quite quickly I got accepted.
But the outback takes its toll on outsiders. After several months in the desert heat, with few photographs she was happy with, running out of money, Megan felt she was about to hit the wall.
And then I thought, well, no, hang on a minute. If you changed your attitude, that nobody here is doing anything. It's what they normally do. It's me that's got the problem here. If I've got to tell this story, because I've started, I can't pull out, and I've got to let the story tell me. And if I'm going to do that, I've got to change my attitude.
The story she tells is through her eyes and lens, but the words aren't just hers. They include the thoughts of the Mardoo people on community, the modern world, footy, relationships, abuse. She was given rare permission to photograph funerals, and there were many.
I found in the first 6 months of being there, it felt like almost we had a funeral every week. And one day we had 3 phone calls come to the clinic of 3 people died in the one day.
Megan felt the unresolved grief led to other problems.
So what you tend to find is that the young people who can't handle stuff will go into town and binge drink. The white fellas in town say, oh no, we've got these bloody black fellas in here drinking again. No understanding of what's motivating them or why they're doing it.
As a woman with a deep interest in the emotional and spiritual world, Megan found herself taking on the role of grief counsellor. Some started calling her Marbin, healer or clairvoyant, particularly after one incident that is both compelling and challenging, at least to traditional Western thinking.
2 Mardoo men left the desert to go to a funeral in Marble Bar. They got there for a day and then they said, we're going out hunting. They never came back.
Police searched, as did the army. The missing men's vehicle was found in the desert where temperatures topped 50 degrees. Eventually, one of the men's bodies was located. The elders decided to conduct their own search for the other missing man, known as the young fella. And surprisingly, they agreed to let Megan join them.
I started to ask in my mind, you know, am I going to be able to help here? And straight away I could feel a buzzing through my hand. I could feel the presence of this young fella. At this stage they weren't convinced he was dead, but I felt straight away he's finished. And my hands just started to buzz and I was like, yeah, Wang, he's over there. That body is over there, I know where it is. Straight away I could feel him, I could feel this young fella's spirit and I could see him in my mind's eye.
One group who don't question the idea that someone can communicate with the dead is the Mardud. It's part of their beliefs. But they did have trouble with a white person doing it.
One man who was pretty critical and pretty sceptical of white fellas, didn't like him much, and particularly a woman, and he turned around, well, what do you see? And he said, he really looked at me and I was nervous under his gaze. I thought, geez, there's all these blokes here, I could really screw this one up.
The men drew a rough map in the desert sand. Megan pointed to where she felt the body was.
So they all looked at each other and went, right, well, we set out on foot. And we set out on foot, and within half an hour I stopped. The energy just left me and Walker kept walking and bang, there he was. We went up on the sandhill and the old man did the sorry business, and that means sitting down and grieving. We walked back to the vehicles and we drove to the only tree there was, and by this stage my adrenaline had been running high. I was absolutely exhausted. We sat under a tree, and normally in Mardud culture, where you're a white fella, you take care of yourself, but they all sat under the tree, and then there was this moment. They all looked around and they parted and they sat down and they said, yeah, you sit here, you sit with us. And in that moment, what I felt was, all of a sudden, you're in here, you're one of us.
These pictures have already earned Megan a Walkley Award for photography. Now, the book that symbolises 8 years' work, and her hope that it will lead to better understanding of the Mardud people and the assistance they need in terms of health, both mental and physical, to give them a better life.
To me, if it does the right thing, if it makes a difference to their world, then I feel it's a good book.
They still see each other regularly. Megan Lewis isn't finished with the Mardud, nor they with her.
Because they're my mates. So they're always ringing me, when are you coming home? So.
What a terrific story. Aren't you pleased you saw that? Brett McLeod with that report. Megan Lewis's book, Conversations with the Mob, published by the University of Western Australia Press, is available now. Her photos go on display at the Fremantle Festival of Photography next month before touring the country. We'll take a break, then update the latest news.